But welcome back to the Data Science Hangout. Hope everyone's having a great week. I'm super excited today because this is my Friday. I'm going snowboarding tomorrow, but hello to anybody that's joining for the first time too. It's great to meet you. I'm Rachel and I'm the host of the Data Science Hangout. Just to kind of introduce this space if it's your first time. It's an open space for the whole data science community to connect and chat about data science leadership, questions you're facing, what's going on in the world of data science. So if you ever want to go back and rewatch or share previous sessions or share with someone who's missed it, it'll be recorded and shared to our brand new Data Science Hangout site, which we can share in the chat window in just a second here. But we really want this to be a space where everybody can participate and we can hear from everyone. So there's 3 ways to ask questions. You can jump in live and raise your hand on Zoom. You can put questions in the Zoom chat. Feel free to put a little star next to the end of your question if you want me to read it out loud, if you have a lot of background noise and dogs are barking or something. But we also have a Slido link where you can ask questions anonymously too. And we'll share that there in the Zoom chat as well. We really love the dialogue that happens live during these Hangouts too. If you find yourself really inspired and have spoken a few times, maybe consider holding back a bit for others to maybe jump into. We want to try and make this as inclusive as possible, and making room for others is also an important aspect of that. So just want to reiterate that we love to hear from all of you, no matter your level of experience or area of work as well. But with all of that, welcome. I'm so excited to be joined by my co-host for today, Theresa Ward, Senior Manager of New Glenn Production at Blue Origin. And Theresa, I'd love to maybe just start off by having you introduce yourself and a little bit about the work that you do.
Sure, I'd love to. So as Rachel mentioned, I'm a senior manager in the program office for New Glenn. And New Glenn is our Saturn V sized, roughly, rocket that will put payloads into space, into orbit. And we're, working on Jeff's vision for millions of people living and working in space. Our team, my team, looks across the New Glenn program, concerns itself with how we operate, how we execute our different program processes. But I also have the business intelligence team, so I'm responsible for generating insight so that the New Glenn program can make better decisions about various things, usually business problems. My background actually is aerospace. I worked for many, many years in electromagnetic effects and lightning protection of aircraft, and then went back to school for data. And so data is sort of my second career. And so I've been doing data for maybe 3 or 4 years now.
Awesome. How did you decide to get into data?
Well, as an engineer and as a fellow at Boeing, working with data and trying to tease insights from data to make better decisions about the design of an airplane was just part of the everyday job. And so it was natural for me to want to, maybe expand that knowledge and be able to use analytics and data science techniques in different ways, outside of engineering. So it was something I've always wanted to do, and had an opportunity to go back to school at night and did that. And so now I'm responsible for the BI team at Blue Origin New Glenn.
That's great. And I think I saw on LinkedIn that you're hiring for
that
team.
Shameless plug. Yeah. Yes. So you can find my LinkedIn profile. My custom URL is Theresa Ward 2. Or you can look at Theresa Ward, Blue Origin, search. I think I pop right up. I'm the only Theresa Ward at Blue. But we are hiring. We're hiring business intelligence analysts with some experience. I've got a link there. And we're also hiring technical project managers. It's a very exciting place to work. We're really stretching the boundaries. And the private space industry is very exciting. It's very fast paced. I'd really encourage people to look at those requisitions and apply. And you can always reach out to me too if you've got questions.
What do you look for when apply in applicants?
So for our business intelligence analysts, we're looking for the requisite of skills, query language experience, SQL, being able to code or be proficient in R or Python. We use a lot of Tableau, but I'm really looking for people who are a good fit for Blue, and Blue operates in a way that is more flat. So there's a lot of leading by influence, being able to think outside the box. I mean, honestly, these are attributes and candidates that everybody's looking for. But it's no different for us, right? Looking for folks that can really help storytell. So it's not just enough to be able to, and maybe this is a good segue into other topics today, but it's not just enough to know the mechanics of pulling data, writing scripts, creating dashboards, maybe doing some predictive analytics. You have to be able to tell the story. We need people who are curious about data, at the end of the day, can look at the products that they're creating. Is what they're creating make sense? Right? Does it really answer the business problems we're trying to solve? So it's not just the requisite skills, but it's also that insight and soft skills that go with it.
Definitely. I love that idea of, or the term, data storytelling. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious how you help teach people on your team how to become better at that, or mm-hmm. or maybe some tips you have on being able to do that.
Sure. So I always point people, I would imagine folks online are familiar with Edward Tufte. Folks might be so Edward Tufte is I still believe emeritus professor at Yale. He's one of the grandfathers of being able to communicate quantitative information in intuitive ways. And he has a day or two course. He's been doing it for years and years on intuitive displays of quantitative information. I highly recommend Edward Tufte. There's a proliferation of Coursera, EDX, all these different ways to take classes in dashboard design. Of course, user experience, as you can get a whole master's degree in that now. It's really about, I think, getting enough exposure to some of those best practices. How do you minimize the ink to data ratio? It's really, I think, going out and doing some research, and a lot of that information is free, right? I mean, you could go and even the Tufte course, I think, is only $300 or something along those lines, but it's worth it. For me, that skill is one of the most important skills. And I came from, so if I go back in time a bit, working lightning protection of airplanes, it's a kind of a safety critical skill for an aerospace company. And so you learn early that the way in which you present information to the chief engineer, to the leadership team, is so important for making good decisions, or I should say smarter decisions about the design of the airplane. So it's driving that kind of discipline, I think, sometimes in our storytelling. How can you really think about how is the user really interpreting your information? Another, not to belabor this, but another, Malcolm Gladwell has a book called Blink. I don't know if anyone's read that one as well. That's, about snap judgments. And oftentimes leadership teams don't have a lot of time to absorb information. And so that makes it even more important that the way in which we express our data tells a story. So it's one of my big initiatives all the time is improving that for the team.
Definitely. I see a lot of great recommendations in the chat window too.
Oh,
and
good.
I'll have to take that, write down that book, Blink, too.
Mm-hmm.
So you said something earlier about work you did before on lightning protection for airplanes, which just sounds so interesting to me. So I just wanted to ask you a bit more about that too, as we have some of the questions come in.
So just maybe a little bit of background about what that entails. So
yeah, that would be great.
Right. So airplanes are designed to withstand lightning attachment. And so if you ever watch a movie, I can't remember the last movie I watched where it might have been the one with Tom Hanks where he's on the desert, he gets stranded. Someone will put in the chat, right? I think that was like a FedEx plane that got hit by lightning, but airplanes are designed to withstand that. And so there's a lot of protection measures that are taken with respect to bonding and grounding and isolating components, sometimes EMC, EMI protection at the box level. So there's a lot that goes into it, but airplanes are protected for lightning. It's been an effort that's been going on for decades. All aerospace companies are really familiar, but not everyone realizes that. I think that there's a lot of effort put into that. And some of the novel materials in recent years have made it more challenging, but it's a very exciting field to be in.
That's cool. So for some of us who are not familiar with some of the space work that is going on, what are some of the projects that your team gets to work on?
Sure. So our team supports the New Glenn program. So that's the rocket that's in development right now. And if you go to blueorigin.com, there's a whole section there on New Glenn. It's very exciting. Blue Origin is probably best known to this point for New Shepard. So New Shepard was the launch vehicle that took William Shatner to space. And there's an Amazon documentary series. I don't know if it's a series, maybe 1 or 2 episodes called Shatner in Space. I don't know if anyone has seen it. It's actually pretty good, but that kind of goes into the launch prep and launch process and post process of putting someone into space via New Shepard. My team on New Glenn, because we're the program office, we really support the entire program. So we might support engineering, we might support production. So the kinds of projects that my team might work on are dashboards that support those business processes. But it's an evolving program. It's very exciting. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. I see, Nicholas, you asked a question earlier in the chat, and I'd love to have you jump in live if you want to ask that.
Yeah. Hey, Theresa.
Hi.
So I'm a lead data scientist at HIG, where we do sort of sustainability SaaS software. Mm-hmm. And we also have a flat hierarchy. And I think that there's a sort of a question of like, how do you set the appropriate structure and context for people to operate effectively within a flat hierarchy, especially if they may not be familiar with that sort of corporate structure?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So maybe without getting into too many details here, I think oftentimes it's really helpful to have some definition of, as roles and responsibilities, I think can help with that, right? So oftentimes in a flat hierarchy situation, you may be put in the room with the VP or put in the room with the CEO. You don't know who your audience is. Sometimes could be anybody, right? So it's oftentimes of high visibility. But in our flat hierarchy, it's been really important to hire the right people. So I know it's kind of skirting the question a bit. But it's also knowing sort of the boundary conditions in which you're working. So being able to scope problems, understanding the business problems that we're working, understanding the stakeholders, who is the audience for the insight that we're producing. I think the process in which we're doing our analytics, say using CrisDM or something, is important the whole process is the influence, right? So it's not just one aspect to it. It's, a well-structured project, knowing our stakeholders, having that open communication with them has been super helpful. And hiring the right people. Sorry, it's when you're in a flat organization, it's difficult you have to be able to think that way. You can't, always lean on others to fight tough battles. Sometimes you have to fight those battles yourself. But if you work with good people who are highly collaborative and are all aligned to the same mission, I think it's easier.
I see someone had a follow-up question to that in Slido too, and it was, what type of people work well in a flat hierarchy?
Well, for us, it's people who are really flexible thinkers. I think people who are highly collaborative. I mean, the word collaborative is sort of overused, but I think that they're people that can exist in an organization where there's some tension, some creative tension, and are comfortable with that. Humility, I think, is really important. Actually, humility might be the biggest thing. How do you, the humility is important to stay aligned to the mission as a team, to work together. We need people who are willing to build relationships, right, with their coworkers, and in a professional way, right, around the work. So I think it's a mix. I think it's a mix of traits that works well. Yeah.
Definitely. And Trevor, I'm just monitoring the chat real quickly. I see you asked a question around hiring. Do you want to jump in and ask that?
Hi, hello guys. I think this is really a very complex question. Some things you can boil down to algorithms. Some things are more human. So it's more about sensing. So when I see or hear hiring the right people, I always wonder what that looks like. So apart from someone being humble as an example, or apart from that person being easy to work with, understanding that they're in a flat organization, I wonder to what extent culture plays a role in that. So if the person is not, if you're not from the same country, different teams, different gender, what role does that play in terms of what is considered as the right person, hiring the right person? I hope my question is clear.
Mm-hmm. I think so. Let me give it a try. So, and I might deviate a little bit from the flat hierarchy piece of it, but my experience is that diversity, encouraging diversity in the workplace is absolutely paramount. And let me give you an example of where different cultures and background experiences have been actually very vital to work. So I spent some time working at Global Good, an intellectual ventures laboratory, as a program manager several years ago, and I supported the Ebola vaccine trials. And that work involved people from all walks of life. You know, you have people in the field in sub-Saharan Africa that we needed to rely on for distribution of the vaccine. We had our academics, our PhDs, MDs, that we were working with stateside on some of the solutions. But that tension is always needed, right? It's the different backgrounds, different professional experiences. Together, it's about that collision of ideas. And in fact, this is a really good segue too into how do you build communities within your organization around the data disciplines. So when I was at Boeing, I co-founded one of the co-founders of the Women in Data Science organization at Boeing. And, you know, how can we encourage diversity in the data disciplines? How can we support one another? You know, how do we educate, mentor, you know, keep good employees? You know, attrition is kind of an issue. So we want to retain people, but the diversity is what makes us better. And without that, and I think corporations are understanding that's an absolutely essential piece of doing business. And so I don't know, I veered off your question a little bit, but I think it's more than just the flat hierarchy with respect to diversity. Diversity is just so centered to how we should do our work.
Okay, so I have a follow-up maybe statement. Yeah, so I mean, I've heard you, a good point, and clearly diversity. I mean, many companies tell you that it improves their bottom line big time, right? Because clearly you come up with better ideas with different perspectives, right? But in the hiring process, right, especially in an organization that is flat, where hiring is not yet down to a science, right? It's about what you sense from the person. You know, how do you, because humility is not necessarily something that you can put and measure with an algorithm, right? So it's you in this interview, you're talking to the person, you're feeding out the person, right? Is how to know, how would I put it? Is how to know that this person, even if they are from a different culture, right? That they still have the traits, not just technical traits, right? The technical traits to blend with the team, because your culture is different from the person. How do you know that this person would be a good blend or a good fit?
Sure. Well, I may not answer your question and satisfactory. I'm not sure I will be able to, but
No
I because I, Theresa, operate a certain way, and I, Theresa, have a lot of experience with diverse employees. I've managed very diverse teams, and so I feel like I'm somewhat calibrated. In respecting cultural differences with, in context of a requisition, or so I'm afraid I'm probably not going to answer it the way maybe you're looking for, but yeah,
no problem.
Thank you though.
Thanks,
Okay,
Theresa.
no
And I love hearing that you started that community at Boeing too. And I'm just curious, is that something that you're starting to do at Blue Origin?
I'm new enough here that not yet, but quite possibly. But that community, I not to veer off maybe into this topic, but there are not the female population, right? The ratio of females to males very low in the data disciplines, more so than STEM, right? Of the STEM disciplines, it's pretty underrepresented by women, and so our mission there really was to attract people to the data disciplines, mentor, and retain. And I think we had community of practice meetings. We had, we had learn at lunch series. We did a lot around, challenges, right? Challenges in the workplace. I'm trying to think about so we touched on different themes. I think that really hit a nerve for people, but we allowed a space for dialogue and conversation. I think just having a community and just allowing a space for dialogue and communication is huge. It could be even unstructured, but just having that support is important.
Thank you. Libby, I see you had asked a question earlier too, and I just wanted to turn the mic over to you if that's okay.
Sure, yeah. So my question was, what mix of people leading versus technical work do you get to do as a senior manager, and how did you know that you were interested in going into leadership as opposed to being an individual contributor?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, in my role, so management roles can differ widely. I'm sure a lot of folks on the phone understand that. In some companies where you're in a management role, you're expected to roll up your sleeves and actually do some technical work. In the role I'm in now, it's a mix, it's a blend. When I was at Boeing as a fellow, certainly I was doing a lot more technical work, but there was an expectation of leadership, that you would provide guidance to team, so forth. I think everybody has a different way of thinking about their career path and what really jazzes them. For me, I really love working with people. I'd love to be on a smart team, a great team where people love working together and we're working towards a common mission and we're getting work done. I mean, there's nothing better. So sometimes I'm a contributor to that. Sometimes I'm leading it, or I like removing roadblocks for teams. There's that delegate and disappear, like as a manager, getting the team to run itself, and so your job is that roadblock remover. I enjoy that, but I vacillate back and forth. So parts of my career, I've been very technical, and I think being technical helps you understand how to manage a team that does that technical work. So I think it's really valuable to have that technical background before you become a manager in that area. But for me, my journey has been a bit of back and forth. I'll do management for a while. Sometimes I'll get bored, or I feel like, I'm getting atrophying, right? I want to learn something different, and then I'll go back to school, learn something different, and then I'll get into the weeds again, and I'll become the manager. It's kind of a cyclical thing for me, but yeah, I think along the way there were times where my interests change. I've been a career professional for a lot of years now, and so the aging process for me has also contributed to what I want to do on a day-to-day basis. And I think as I've aged, I want to spend more time with people. So that's where I am.
Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Theresa. I like that you talk about that as like a cyclical process. And I think that hasn't come up as much on this. Like we talk about going into leadership, but never like going back and forth. Rob, I see you have your hand raised. You want to jump in?
Yeah, I had a question sort of on the topic of what we were talking about with hiring and flat hierarchies and sort of diversity. And I think the short of my question is, how do you encourage people within a flat organization or a team? So, you're from a leadership point of view, how do you encourage people to feel encouraged and safe to speak up when it is a flat organization? And I guess some context is like, it's very easy for me to speak up because, for most of my life, most of the people that I interact with in a professional capacity, right, they kind of look and smell and feel like me, and same gender, same race. And it's easy for me to speak up. And as a leader, how do you encourage people that don't look and feel and smell precisely like you?
Sure. And I'll talk more generally, not just Blue or Boeing or anywhere else. I think it's really important for me, it's, building trust. Well, there's a couple of things. One is the external environment. Let me frame it this way. There's the internal environment and the external environment. So the internal environment would be, my ability as a leader to build trust in the team. Sometimes it's teasing out inputs that I wouldn't get in a group setting. So sitting down with people one-on-one to really understand what they're thinking, allowing some space, some quiet space in a conversation, try not to fill every second, and allowing team members to really feel it's a safe environment to express their concerns or questions, and so I try to do more listening than speaking. Sometimes it's easier said than done, but that's the intent. But then there's the external environment, right? The external environment in a company. I'm not talking Blue specific or Boeing specific. I'm just thinking in general, right? I think some company cultures are more open culture, making, maybe encouraging. They want to encourage people to, maybe express safety concerns or risks, or and so, but I've also worked in places where you didn't feel as safe, right, to express yourself, maybe to the leadership team. So I think it's a blend, right? It's a blend of the external environment in which you're working and the internal environment. Internally, you have a lot more control, especially as a manager. Externally, as a manager, you can help manage that, but the company in which you're working for plays a big part in that.
I love that point of like listening more, but leaving the space for people to give that feedback. And I think that's something that's harder sometimes remotely, like when we have one-on-ones through Zoom. It's
yeah.
like,
There's I got to tell you, there was when I was taking some courses through Stanford Professional Studies, Jeffrey Pfeffer, who's I think he's still a professor there in the business school at Stanford, has this whole lecture about if you're in a technical discipline and you're managing a technical team and you're talking the techie talk all day, you're clicking antennas with people and you're using that left side of your brain all the time, all day long, that there's a need to actually stop and pause for a few minutes before you have conversations with employees or your team about hard conversations, right? Maybe things that really need the right side of your brain to, and I'm generalizing, right? But you need the soft skill part of your brain to kick in. So there's psychologically goes into there's an actual shift, and he actually recommends people just take 5 minutes before when you're transitioning from your technical discussions, transitioning to your people conversation. That always stuck with me. And so I try to do that.
I love that. That's awesome. I need to do that too. It's hard when you're like running from a meeting to meeting.
It's really hard. Yeah, it's really, really hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Ezra, I see there were a lot of follow-up questions on like flat hierarchy as well. And you had one earlier. Would you want to jump in and ask that?
Yes. Excuse me. Yes, I can. There are a number of questions about flat hierarchy. And one of the things that I was interested in knowing from your perspective, if there are creative differences within your organization about, person one wants to do it one way, person two wants to do it another way, but it's flat. How do you determine which way to do, which direction to go in?
Yeah, I guess it's not, when I say it's flat, I'm not saying it's completely flat, right? I mean, there is hierarchy. It's just that employees have an opportunity to influence change at all levels. So my job then would be to help, moderate conversations that are where maybe there's constructive differences. You're always going to need that, despite what kind of organizational structure you're in, the ability to help build relationships, bring people together. And then sometimes there's conflict resolution. So I'm not, I may, when I talk about flat hierarchy, it might be a good idea for me to spend a minute talking about what I meant by that, which is, we do have a hierarchy, but, just what we have at other companies. But there's an opportunity, though, where we leverage titles less, right? There's less of a throwing around your weight, I'm such and such manager, therefore you will listen to me, right? It's about how do you get work done through relationships.
Thank you, Theresa. That's really helpful. I see, Christy, you had your hand raised, maybe to add into this conversation. Do you have another question?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to jump off of what Theresa said, and also maybe address the question more directly with an idea that I've seen work well in previous teams, but particularly when in a flat group and everybody has ideas and everybody is incredibly curious and smart. Of course, you're going to have some conflict with respect to some people want to do this, some people want to do that. I think it was beneficial that we were on an experimentation team. What we did was we took that to heart, and part of our culture was to embody an experimentation mindset. So when we came across a disagreement about how, I feel like every retro conversation is how we're going to conduct retro. So, we got to this point where it was like, okay, well, let's try this. Doesn't mean we have to commit to it forever. Let's take maybe a couple of sprints. We'll try it. We'll come back. We'll discuss it in retro, see if it's, measurably better or seemingly better, and then make a decision based on our experience.
I love it.
It's really just like a very low hanging fruit, low friction way to just move forward on something and not get stuck there. And I think people are receptive to it.
Sorry, you've really hit a nerve with me. I love that. There's a book, I don't know who wrote it, someone knows, called The Fifth Discipline. Have you guys read that? So it's about learning organizations. How do you build a learning organization? How do you build a team and an organization that experiments? That's okay with failure, failing fast, failing early. How do you build that learning mindset? So that really resonates with me. Thanks for bringing that up, Christy. Yeah.
Sure, and I wish I could take credit for it, but I'm actually going to plug my very first hiring manager and mentor, and the person that I've learned everything about culture, and maybe not everything, but Chris J. Powers. He has a website online, and you can you can look up a lot of the talks that he's given. He does a lot more software development talking now, but very committed to team building.
Thanks, Christy. Could you put that in the chat window too?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Oh, that's great. Fantastic.
Teresa, on this topic of culture too, there was an anonymous question that was, have you ever had the experience as a leader to need to come in and facilitate that turning around of the culture?
I'm not, maybe I might need, so I might need to expand on that a bit. Like, I'm not sure. So culture, you mean the corporate culture or maybe the culture of the team?
So
Maybe
that was my
both?
question. Yeah, actually, both or
Yeah.
either, I think would actually be really helpful. Just trying to understand if you've ever come into a situation where maybe there's been leadership shakeups or direction is fuzzy and et cetera.
Yeah.
Any kind of anything that can really take a hit to team or corporate culture. How do you manage that, either keeping it positive or if it's gone toxic, how do you recover?
Yeah. Gosh. I've been in some situations where there's been big shakeups. I'm talking agnostically, company agnostically right now. That's a really tough question because oftentimes you're not a change agent in those situations, right? So when there's been a big shakeup or leadership change, you're just as much a victim sometimes to those external forces as the people who were removed. Or, but as far as things you can control, okay, so if we were to distinguish the things I can control from the things I can't control, the things I can control are, helping to manage morale on my team. I think a lot of that is keeping the communications open. I've been in positions over the years where we've had staff meetings, and one of the first things I've done in a staff meeting is talk rumors, right? So, especially in a situation that's been volatile, or, what are people hearing? Almost like an airing of grievances, right? Sometimes is necessary because what happens that the team sometimes needs a way to vent what's happening around them. Sometimes as a manager, you are that only way in which they vent. So I found myself over the years in that role. But yeah. The thing I can't control is facilitating venting. How's that?
It's
but what can we do to make it better, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's an incredibly important role to take on as a manager. ICs need that safe space to be able to vent and know that it's safe.
Right.
For sure. I see everyone saying Festivus annual airing of grievances. Javier, I see you had asked a question in the chat just a few minutes ago, if you want to jump in with that one.
Thanks, Rachel. And Teresa, I've been loving this presentation and your comments. So
thanks.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I'm just curious, if you're able to talk about it, what are some of the R Studio projects or workflows that your team is working on? Are you focused more on like reporting automation or statistical programming and modeling, maybe web app development, or is it a little bit of all?
Yeah, I'm going to talk agnostically to maybe how my experience with RStudio has been over the years. It's a little bit of everything you just said. So I've been on teams where we've used our Shiny, in lieu of Tableau or other solutions to communicate to the audience the insights that we're generating. I personally used R over the years. I've used R a lot for NLP work and predictive analytics work. So I think I have seen R used in all ways. I've seen R enthusiasts. I've seen R haters. I've met. I think for me, academically I was trained in R, and so I gravitate towards R. But I also know Python, and there are things that I can do in R that I can't do in Python. and vice versa. And I think R, wherever I've been, R has been used either for reporting or helping with reporting or performing the analytics that we need. I have to be general, sorry. Yeah.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. I just switched companies a few months back, and I'm, I believe, the sole R programmer at this company.
Oh, really?
So, you know, I get a lot of questions like, why are you using R? And so, you know, for me, what has really helped has been just showing kind of what you can do within the same language, within the same ecosystem, like, you know, our markdown report knitted as an HTML doc and deployed, Jargon web slides, or, you know, our markdown web slides, or like you said, shiny apps, like all these things, when people actually see the end results, and if you take the time to kind of style your apps a little bit and make it look really professional, then people are like, oh, I didn't know R could do this. You know?
Yeah. Oh, yes. I think a lot of it is education, you know, showing the possible, the art of the possible with R, I think converts people. Yeah.
We were just on a meetup actually with the Dutch Institute of Public Health, and they said they did that exactly, like showing that prototype of what was possible. There was an anonymous question that was, do you have advice for introverted individuals and or people who don't have as much privilege on teams where meetings are taken up by the same few voices?
Yeah. Yeah, what a great question. And I'm introverted by nature, so I've trained myself to be an extrovert. That's a whole other conversation. Because sometimes corporate America, right, rewards extroverts, which I think is also at the heart of this question a bit, which is how do you have a voice when it's hard to have a voice? So, you know, and it really depends on what's happening. So if oftentimes I find that introverts, you know, if you're doing good work and you're producing results, a lot of that will speak for itself. If you're in situations where there's, you know, personalities that dominate the conversation, you know, then sometimes the way around that is to have that one-on-one time with the lead or the manager to make sure that your voice is heard. Sometimes there's not a lot that can be done, you know. I mean, that's one of the reasons why you lean on your lead or you lean on your manager, because they have to make space for everybody. So I'm not sure that gets to the heart of maybe what you're asking, but that's what comes to mind. Yeah.
Thanks,
So,
Theresa.
I have a thought on that as well, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm exceptionally introverted, and I know a lot of my former colleagues in this call will be surprised to hear that. I think it's important to like find your voice and just be comfortable speaking out, which is very, very uncomfortable to do, but it gets a lot better with practice. So find your way to just speak out once, do it twice, do it 3 times, then it'll become comfortable and habitual, and hopefully you feel comfortable with your colleagues to actually speak out. It's uncomfortable, but growth is uncomfortable.
Thank you, Josiah. I saw Christy, I thought I saw Arthi raise your hand, or Christy raise your hand if you want to jump in too.
Sure. I was just going to say also introvert, trained as an extrovert through many years of waiting tables. And, you know, I have to say that I think for me, it's really easy for me to speak up even when I'm terrified, because I feel so compelled to talk about the things that I care about fiercely, whether it's equality, you know, standing up for injustice that I see in the workplace, you know, just mediating culture, just all of the things that I care about, peeking at A/B tests. I'm gonna speak up about these things because I care about them a lot. And so I think that, you know, find a thing that you care about, find a safe space and start practicing. What I did when I was starting as a new data scientist was I used my team and I would test out my crackpot ideas on them. And if they didn't laugh at me, then I would maybe talk to a leader that I felt comfortable with. And if they didn't laugh at me, then maybe I knew I was onto something. And I also had kind of employed some squeeze methods. So, you know, I think there's a lot of different ways to go about it, but I think the most important thing is find yourself a mentor. And if you don't know how to find a mentor, reach out to me on LinkedIn and I'll help find you a mentor. It's really, really critical because if your ideas are sitting in your head, they can't do anything.
Good advice.
I'm curious to everyone if like having a way to ask anonymous questions helps with that. Because sometimes I think like internally at our studio, when we can ask an anonymous question, if someone's like, oh, that's a great question, it kind of validates me. And then I feel more comfortable to ask it with my name next time. And I'm just curious if other people have had that experience.
I think that's 100% accurate. Having the ability to ask a question anonymously, especially in a larger setting, if you're more introverted, is super helpful.
Yeah, we have town halls at our company, and they've been all virtual. And we've gone on for an hour and a half of Q&A because all the questions are anonymous, and the CEO takes the time and he answers everything.
Wow.
And he loves it because it's interesting because he likes to, talk and explain and everything else. But I mean, you get every form of question when it's virtual, and when it's virtual and anonymous. And there's no fear at all. Like, people ask some pretty severe stuff. But you know what? That's what it's for. If you're gonna have a Q&A and you're gonna, as a leader, you gotta keep people in the loop. Then you got to be able to answer the hard ones as well as the softballs.
Thanks, Brian. Prabha, I saw you were gonna jump in before too.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about the previous topic, this introvert extrovert thing. That's as a manager and a people leader, I feel I have a big role to play to enable the extroverts and the introverts in my team, creating safe spaces for them. Even the people who who are introverted, when you give them the right opportunity in topics that they're passionate about and they excel in, and you create that opportunity for that topic and or meeting, they will exhibit extroverted characteristic traits. It's pulling them out a little bit, making them comfortable in their own space, in their own skin. And I truly believe that as a manager, that's part of my responsibility. Now, going to the second thing that Brian talked about, anonymous questions and in town halls. Brian, I'm glad your CEO and leadership team take that time and effort to answer all the hard questions. I have asked anonymous questions in company town halls to leadership, specifically addressing, I want this leader to ask it, and they have skipped those questions for lack of time or just blown past it. So kudos to you for working where you work.
Thank you all for jumping in there too. And thank you to whoever asked that question. That was an awesome question. I see there was also a question in the chat that I'll read out loud, and feel free to jump in if you want to add any more context. But it was, I recently joined a data science group of younger folks who use R, and their degrees are in math and science, while mine is engineering. So I offer a lot to them, but I'm way behind in programming, which I never formally learned. Any suggestions on where to start?
Yeah, that's me. I'll just take one quick minute, mainly here because I want to learn R. My supervisor is excellent where I've joined, and he likes I brought a lot of fresh ideas to him in messy Excel sheets, and he says, learn R. And he said, go online, find some stuff, and I found myself here. So just mainly just wanted to say that's why I'm here, and there may be some other people a bit the same, and kind of wondering, I found you guys here through LinkedIn, I think, and 2 or 3 other websites, and kind of just going, and it's going very well, but I figured there may be some other people and some tips and stuff. So that's pretty much it. And just wanted to throw that out there, and I welcome any direction. And so far it's been going very well. I've been integrating data sets, aligning stuff with our plotting stuff very slowly, but progressively. And that's mainly it. Yep.
Well, I first want to just say welcome, Ben. Welcome to the Data Science Hangout. I'm glad you found us. I know that there's probably a bunch of resources that people on the call can recommend if you want to put some in the chat too, but I'm curious, Theresa, if there's specific ones that you have in mind.
I think this is a good crowdsourcing question because I'm self-taught and and had classes on R, so I'm probably not the best one to ask.
And I also noticed the marathon in the background, so you may have to connect with Frank on here too.
Oh, yeah, a bunch of them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know a few people are putting things in the chat too, which are for data science. There's also a great online learning community associated with that book. And it's a Slack channel that you can join. And I'm going to put that one in the chat too. But I think that's a great place to start too. And it's a great community of people learning there. I see someone's hands raised. Brian, do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, so I was just putting in the chat. Many moons ago, I was actually obsolete and needed to learn a new language. And so I picked up R, and I was between jobs at the moment. So I crammed the Coursera curriculum down in about 3 months. It was like 9 classes. But one of the things that I found useful was rather than use their data sets, I had old data sets from other projects in Excel that I used to get better at doing stuff like time series and things that I was really interested in. But it's a good program. And the other place that I do probably almost 100% of my learning now is on Udemy. And just find a well-rated course, half-hour a day. It's what I always say. You'll be done in a few weeks, and you will have gone miles without even realizing it. And I mean, that's part of my daily routine now. Half-hour Udemy in the morning and several hours every night. But you'll get there fast.
Yep. And my new group that I'm working in, fortunately being new, they're trying to find things for me to do. So I have the luxury of a lot of time, and they've been letting me do billable work with learning R, understanding it takes me a bit of time. So I've been able to do new, fresh things with R, which I won't have forever. And it's a good month or so to really tap into that. A lot of us face a lot of billable things and stuff. And the previous group I was in really just didn't see much light in this, but that's but yeah, moving forward, I'm just excited. Yeah, and I agree some of the old stuff is good because you know how it is, but I'm at a point now where I'm given a couple of tasks and I'm actually doing them in R, and it's a research thing that can take some time. So it's been good, and I've been going through tutorials and finding things. But again, some of these suggestions, I'll definitely document these, and I appreciate everybody and all the suggestions. So thank you.
Your biggest friend that you will find is R Markdown. Because when you start publishing in R Markdown and it's reproducible and it's professional looking, even if it's 2 slides or 3 slides, it's going to go miles for you. And I mean, at the end of the day, is the role of data science is to present ideas to people, and R Markdown is to me, in my opinion, it's the ultimate tool to do it. And as some people know, I'm a big Python person, and I use tons of Reticulate, and I present most of my Python in R Markdown too. So it'll be your best friend down the road.
Thanks, Brian. And there's so many great recommendations in the chat too. So I'm going to put my LinkedIn here. If you wanted to connect with me, I'll send those to you as well. And apologies, I didn't catch your name. I saw it was A Judge.
Yep, Aaron, like the baseball player, only
Aaron.
not the baseball player, but yeah.
nice to meet you.
I run marathons. I don't play baseball, but yep.
Yeah, connect with me there, and I can send you all these too. Brian, Sam, I saw you had your hand raised earlier too, if you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, apparently there's 2 Brians in this call, so no worry, Brian. So
3 Brians actually.
Oh, 3 Brians. Okay, cool.
Spelled the same way.
All right. Well, I meant to answer Aaron. So for me, I learned R by myself before my master program. So From my background, most of the time I work on spreadsheet Excel. So I found a book like Excel user R for Excel users. So it's kind of like helped me to transition, get started into like R programming. So it helps me to, you know, the book kind of the way written is speak from an Excel point of view and then translate to R. And then that's how I got into it. And then start picking up other resources like watching YouTube tutorials in R, and then as well of, you know, taking some courses online. And that helped me to prep up, you know, be familiar with programming in general, and then help me transition to Python, where, you know, use both R and Python for my master's. And then now I'm working pretty much Python right now with my current job, but R I'm still my first language, so which I really enjoy the most. But yeah, definitely like Aaron, like right now you say you're working with spreadsheet or something. That's my recommendation, like working from Excel to R, Python is like a really great way, you know, moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Mike, I saw you had your hand raised too.
Yeah, thanks. So I would echo, learning in R Markdown is a fantastic way to do it, because you, in many of the learning resources, you'll see there's the chunk of text that says, what is it we're going to try and do? And then a block of code that says, now I'm going to do it. But the good thing is that if you work through that, at the end of the day, you hit the knit button and you will check that all your code is still working all the way through, top to bottom, and you get a PDF of what you've just worked on, or an HTML or whatever format you like. So in that sense, it's really nice to just kind of capture, okay, today I learned this thing, start to finish, capture it, move on to the next thing. But as other people have said, as you're learning that, you can then figure out that, well, instead of it all being R chunks, I can have SQL chunk, I could have a Python chunk, and you can start swapping in these different really cool little bits that can go into a Markdown. The other thing I should say, from the RStudio conferences, like from probably 2 years ago and back from there are workshops where all the workshop materials, including the Master the Tidyverse course, they're all available online on GitHub, in the RStudio Education GitHub. So you can actually go to GitHub, download all of that content with the slides, the exercises, everything you need is going to be there, and start working from that point. Those are just, it's amazing the resources that are available on there. Last tip, sorry.
No, I love it.
is I'm a certified Tidyverse trainer, so I'm slightly passionate about this. If you can start with learning, as people have said, you know, creating markdown documents so that you've then got something nice to share with your clients and say, or your customers, and say, hey, you know, here's your answer and here's why. The other thing is learning something like visualization, right? So you get your data in from wherever the source is, visualize it with ggplot2 or some other method, because the training is saying it's really great if you can get productive things out really quickly, right? Because that then keeps the motivation up, and it says, well, you know, okay, I'll learn about this other topic later, but right now I can make some cool graphs. So start with something that will actually, you could then deliver onto your customers' clients. Start there, and then gradually kind of go into more complex data types or things like that.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah, it's
Mike.
mostly internal stuff I'm doing, but eventually we want to publish this. So it's mostly a lot of back and forth rapid fire between my coworkers, and then getting things that make sense and then going with that. And, you know, I was told either use R, Python, take your pick. I kind of went this way, but I wasn't really fed here. And yeah, thank you. That was helpful. Yep.
The other thing, sorry, Rachel, the other thing I'm really passionate about is everyone should be using R Markdown every time, right? If you write more code than comments, write more comments and use R Markdown. If you write more comments than code, put it in R Markdown. I find that writing in R Markdown is the aid memoir for later. For me, in 6 months, when I come back to it and I was thinking, what the heck was I thinking when I programmed this? If you've got it in an R Markdown, you've got that kind of story board that says, this is what I was doing, this is why I was doing it, here's where I got the data, who sent it to me, when did they send it, where did I store it? So it's a godsend later on when you try to reconstruct what you were doing.
I like what Libby said too, or even me tomorrow when I can't remember why I coded that. I feel like that too. Theresa, I know an hour just went by super fast, so I just wanted to see if you had a few more minutes to stay on with us.
I don't actually. Okay. I do have to run, but this has been an awful lot of fun, and it's been a pleasure. And please look me up on LinkedIn, look at my post, take a look at those requisitions. It's a very exciting time to be part of the space industry, and I'm happy to connect.
Thank you so much, Theresa, for hanging out with us and sharing all your insights. I'm sorry we kept you over a little bit.
Not a problem.
But, thank you for saying we can follow up on LinkedIn as well. I'm happy to stay on if anybody wants to stay and hang out and continue the conversation around learning resources too. But thank you so much, Theresa.
Right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good rest of the day. Javier, I know you were just about to add some more resources as well. If you want to jump in.
I didn't realize what time it was. It sounds like Aaron has sort of, management approval and go ahead to do this, which I think is great. I was mainly going to tell him that maybe having a conversation with his leadership and maybe some of the, business partners that are used to sort of receiving deliverables in Excel format, that it might be worth having a conversation, which I did at my last job, just saying, hey, we're in the process of transitioning a lot of our modeling workflows from Excel to something with our programming language or Python. And so if you could be patient with us, these deliverables will take a little bit longer to get to you at first, but then, you'll start seeing much faster, like rapid delivery of these things. That really helped, my team, because we would get these sort of ad hoc requests that the requester thought would take like 30 minutes, but even in Excel, it would take much longer than that, let alone starting a whole new sort of process and workflow of doing it programmatically. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, that's very much appreciated. A lot of what I face is billable time and not so much turnaround. There are two things with clients. There's turnaround time, when did they get their stuff back and how much time do we bill? I'm mainly focused on my less billable time. And again, where I was working a year ago, it wasn't so much a big deal, but where I am now, they look at that as a valuable thing. And even if it takes a little longer now and twice as fast next time, it really seems that they're interested in that. And I'm very excited about that. So it's mostly just internal time. And I understand there's two things and all that. But I'll keep that in mind. Mostly our clients want to see good results, as promised, however that was promised. And that's really beyond me. I'm not a salesperson, so I don't do that so much. They check with me and say, how long does it take you to do this? I'm like, well, there's, I can get it done by this time in this many hours. There's sort of two things that I juggle with. And I really face both of those. So you hit one of them and I have a bit more focus on the other, but there are the two of them. And I don't know if maybe others have the same thing too or not, because, a lot of this running Excel stuff, there's been times months ago where I'd run Excel and go to bed and come back and Excel's still computing. I have a 64-bit computer. It's super fast. And I have Excel files that are over 2 gigs in size. And I was like, this is silly, so yeah, thank you.
I see you had your hand raised too, if you want to jump in. Or maybe you accidentally have your hand raised. Oh, I think you might be just muted. There you go.
Hello. I would like to answer your question from my side. Is that I'm a big fan of project-based learning, and I understand that you're an engineer, so you have tasks to solve. So my two tasks would be to really go and solve problems, and then you'll be probably having people around you who can help you.
I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing you. Can you hear us?
Is it any better right now?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay. So accomplishing stuff was the thing that really taught me the best. I'm a big fan of project-based learning. So accomplishing tasks is the best teacher, in my humble opinion, and that's where I would. In my company, I always have people working for me who would like to take classes on Udemy, first learn the language and then maybe try to solve problems. But I always stop them, and times have changed, and I push them into the challenge, especially if there are resources around that you can make use of. That would be my style.
Definitely. Thank you for all these suggestions too. I see Auntie, you said, oh, we don't have to go yet. I still want to say, okay. Thank you. I thought you were adding a tip there too, but thank you so much for joining. Are there other suggestions that people have on the call? Hey, Larry. Oh, I saw your hand was raised for a second. There you go.
I was trying to find it in mute, but one trick that I do is I log my victories and failures and post them for everybody to see, and it holds me accountable. And then whenever I get a failure, I get quite the response from the R community on how to fix it. So you could try that too.
For sure. I would say there's no shortage of people that are willing to help and want to share their experience too, which is really helpful. I know some of the other questions that we didn't get to were specifically for Theresa, more around like working in space and her thoughts on that. But if there are other questions that we didn't address that you want to pose to the broader group, feel free to jump in too.
I love Javi's comment from leadership.
Sorry, Kate, I see you had a question.
Well, it's more of a statement. I just wanted to say, like, thank you all for the discussion today about, I don't know, introvertedness and everything. It was interesting and encouraging as somebody who doesn't speak up all the time.
Thank you so much, Kate. Yeah, I love that part of the conversation too. And I was thinking maybe we should take all the tips that were shared in the chat and live and put those all together to share with everyone too.
I was able to control all copy, but yeah, it's nice to have it in there for, yep.
Brian, I think you were about to add something too.
Yeah, I love Javi's comment. The worst conversation you're going to have is when it starts with, this will only take you 20 minutes. And I don't care what tool they think they're using. You know, when that phrase comes out of the person's mouth, I'm like, oh, here we go. It just resonated. Thanks for bringing that up, Javi.
Yeah, thank you all for jumping in. This is seriously one of my favorite parts of the week, and it's so fun to see people coming back week after week and finally like getting to know each other too. I just want to say thank you all so much for joining, and looking forward to hopefully seeing you next week too. But have a great rest of the day, everyone.